This is the Times Television Network, and you're watching ET Now.
Over the last 5 months, some serious brainstorming has happened between an eminent jury and plenty of young leaders across India Inc. in an endeavor to select who will be the leaders of tomorrow. And that's why today we have a special interactive discussion between 5 CEOs of India Inc. who will now give a bit of bring an interaction and give some ideas to young leaders of today how to become young leaders of tomorrow. Let me first introduce my special panel today on the show. From JP Morgan, we have Kalpana Morparia. From McKinsey, we've got Mr. Adil Zainubai. Nitin Paranjape from HUL. Also on the show, Pramod Bhasin of Genpact. And how can I forget, Harsh Mariwala of Marico. And 5 young leaders who are joining us here on the stage to engage with them in an interactive session. Amulya Goyal is with us on the show. Another young leader is Atma Shivalanka. We've got Nidhi Goyal as well. And with me right here are Preetam Datta and Rajesh Jaisingh. Thank you all for being here on the show. And it's my pleasure to begin the discussion with the one question that's come to every single young leader's mind. What does it take to be a young leader? I'll start with you, Kalpana.
So, you know, sometimes I feel I've got to ask them this question, is to say, tell me what it is to be a young leader, because each one of us this side, with the probable exception of Nitin, would love to know the answer to that one. Because if I could trade places with any one of you, I'd do it in a heartbeat. You are, I think, the blessed amongst young leaders anywhere in the world, and I include China in that, because India is at such a wonderful cusp today. The opportunities abound. You've been blessed with excellent education, and I cannot think about a sweeter spot really in the history of our nation in the times to come that you're in today. So plenty of opportunities. The only limiting factor is your own ambition.
Is your own ambition. Pramod, you would switch places? I mean, barring for the idea of having not white hair, but black, at least for now.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I think the opportunity that these young leaders have before them, as Kalpana said, is unparalleled. It's almost like there's a new railroad being built through India. Now, that railroad may be with broadband, it may be with technology, it could be with a new type of entrepreneur or retail stores or businesses. But the opportunity that that throws out for people who can grab it is immense. And I don't think I've ever seen, again, this promise reflected as widely as it can be. I would add a couple of other things. I think global exposure, I hope, has helped all of them be a lot better than we were at their ages. I don't think, I'll speak for myself, I guess I shouldn't speak for all of you. I know I didn't have the brain capacity at that point in time to do the multiplicity of things these young leaders are able to do, to absorb the input, digest the information, come out with analysis and thoughts in a way that is unparalleled. And I think that in itself launches 1,000 ideas. So, yes.
Away from brain capacity, let me replace that with bandwidth and ask Mr. Mariwala to pick up three key qualities that you as a leader look for when you've got a young leader sitting in front. And you've got plenty here.
I think the first thing I would look at is, what is the desire to succeed? Is there a burning desire to succeed? And that gets translated into ambition, execution, persistence. So I think that covers virtually learning. I think that's very, very critical. Number 2, I think learning, it's very important that every person goes through setbacks in life. And if you look at setbacks as learning rather than learning and risk-taking, basically, is very, very important. Yeah. And the third is, I would say, at an individual level, I think humility is very important.
Nitin, there is always that dilemma, be the jack of all trades or be the master of one. How does a young leader look at those 2 aspects?
So I don't see a dilemma. I think as a leader who's there to lead, I cannot imagine you being in a position to lead without having a reasonably good perspective of the drivers of business that you've got. So you need to have that. Equally, it's impossible in today's world to actually lead without having some expertise, some domain understanding in one core area. So the way I see it is, you have no choice but to have a very good understanding of all the drivers of business
Adil, we're also in times today which are challenging, and all these young leaders are faced with real situations. Do you think the qualities that a young leader needs today are so different from the ones that they needed, let's say, about a decade or two ago?
Generally, leadership also grows depending on the situation. So, because the economy is growing so well and there are so many opportunities, you'd expect to see more leaders emerge. If the economy was in terrible shape and there were no economic opportunities, I think you'd just see the same characteristics not really lead to the kind of leadership that you'd see today. So, Kalpana, I'd agree with you that the timing, the reason I would trade places, of course, is it's nice to have hair again. So, but, this is such a time filled with opportunity that the chances that one's leadership qualities can shine and that you can succeed based on that is much higher than it would have been in other times, right? So I think the timing is great to do that.
So let me first get Nidhi to ask a question, because she has a situation. She wants to know about the times we live in today.
We grew up hearing that greed is good, and it's not really the evil thing that it's made out to be. But then, over the last couple of years, we saw that, maybe not greed, but reasonable risks are good, and you need to really define that thin line between the two.
So I knew this question was going to come to me as a banker. So I'm still not going away from that statement to say greed is indeed good because it creates that hunger in you, the drive that we referred to. But we should never ever forget that there is a particular purpose behind which we were created, allowed by society to continue doing business. And I think instances over the last few years, including examples from my own industry, actually seem to suggest that we probably somewhere lost that purpose along the line.
Yeah, I can hear both of you. One of you is nodding this way. Well, that's also the Indian nod, but you've got to tell me what you think.
I would agree. I personally have never liked that phrase, greed is good. I think it's an incorrect phrase, and I don't think it adequately describes what it's trying to do. It was formed, you must remember, on Wall Street, where perhaps greed is good. But I don't think it's good anywhere else in the world.
You don't need to set up your own business to say you're an entrepreneur.
And I think I can't think of having a boss, if you ask me. So the biggest difference, apart from what she's saying, is that you are your own boss. I don't want to report anything.
Sometimes you have to make a choice with consequences you have to live with forever. Today, she faces that choice. Green or red? She has friends who know everything about her. She asks them on WhatsApp. Most say red, others say green. Her mind's made up. Purple it is. Being young, it's not as easy as it looks. Smart apps on Nokia smartphones for life's epic dramas.
This week on India Mart Leaders of Tomorrow series, our focus is on the automotive sector and how small and medium enterprises have contributed to the growth of this sector. Catch the success of Carnation Auto, Super King Tires, Sanatan Autoplast and Rajneesh International.
I started a new business model which meets the need of the customer, which was not being met. We are into replacement market and we have more than 50% share.
India Mart Leaders of Tomorrow, the automotive special episode 14, only on ET Now.
Brought to you by IndiaMart.com. More buyers, more suppliers, more business. Brought to you by Honda City. Now starts at 7.49 lakhs.
You have been sort of talking about this whole entrepreneurial piece. What would your question be on this?
Yeah, actually many young leaders like us would have aspirations to start their own business. So what are the top 5 mantras or success factors
they all want to carry back a little mental book
that you would suggest, especially from Mr. Mariwala, because you have that Marico Center of Innovation where you...
Okay. Actually, let's take it from everyone. Let me start with Kalpana and go up to Mr. Mariwala and then step on. What 5? Do you have 5 on your fingertips?
So I have just one, which is a mantra I passionately believe in. you don't need to set up your own business to say you're an entrepreneur.
So it's not necessarily setting up a company, it's a spirit with which you actually continue in the organization.
Can I just add on? I'm reminded of a big lesson that I was taught by the late Professor C.K. Prahlad. And I remember an interaction with him 11 years ago. And he had asked me a question as to what he would want to see more. What did he think, or what did I think HUL as a company needed more? And I had said, if he could be more enterprising, more innovative, etc. And he says, what do you think that requires? And to cut a long story short, he simply went on the board and wrote 2 alphabets, A and R, and went on to describe that the only difference between a managerial mindset and an entrepreneurial mindset was the relationship between these 2 alphabets, A and R, where A stood for ambition and R stood for resource.
Mr. Mariwala.
Just a little different point. I agree that you can have entrepreneurship in what Kalpana has done, but at least at a personal level, I've never had a boss. And I think I can't think of having a boss, if you ask me. So the biggest difference, apart from what she's saying, is that you are your own boss. I don't want to report to anybody.
I wonder how many of you are willing to go out and say, I'd like to be like that. I don't know how many you would. Yeah? Okay.
So I think the freedom of actually driving your own decision and destiny. Because ultimately, if you're an organization, you're accountable to somebody.
Yeah.
So if you're an entrepreneur, especially if you are a privately held entrepreneur, you're not accountable to anybody. If you're a public company, then you're accountable to shareholders and others, board and all that. But I think that freedom of completely being on top, to me, is one of the biggest benefit of being an entrepreneur. Apart from what she's saying at a corporate level, yes, risk-taking, driving ambition, all that.
Let's put Mr. Mariwala's theory as a question to all of you. Mr. Mariwala wants to know how many of you feel that you need to be entrepreneurs outside of the suggestion that Kalpana made about being enterprising within your own organization. Let's get some answers. The second row, raise some hands. Here, even the front row.
Getting on to the point that ma'am made about entrepreneurship within organizations. So I feel that that opportunity does exist, but wouldn't that be under the constraints, or wouldn't the resources being made available to you be in the larger objective of the organization itself? So I would rather tend to agree more with Mr. Mariwala. When a person who does not report to anyone, is not accountable to anyone, the real spirit of entrepreneurship would come out only then.
But I wonder, with that kind of a question, is that a quality of a growing leader, where you're hungry to be the man in control? And I just want to sort of take it from what he said, because, or the woman in control. Is that something that is an inherent quality? Does that reflect the hunger that we all have been talking about? Or is it too soon to look at that as an opportunity, to be that person in control?
I think there's a difference about risk, about your ability to take risk, which I think is different. I must tell you, having now a CEO of Genpact, I'm moving away, I'm trying to do my own thing. There are very often times at night when I do wake up with a sort of hollow feeling in the pit of my stomach, saying, do I know where I'm going? Do I know what I'm doing? I don't have all the resources.
Right now as you speak, they're all thinking, we're all hoping that after we have our bank accounts like yours, we will be thinking about entrepreneurship.
So I think it's about risk, clearly, and your appetite for risk. Because a lot of people may not have this appetite for risk, and having the appetite for risk, which allows you to think beyond the resources you have, is essential. Because otherwise you will stop. Otherwise you're never going to get off the ground, because there are 15 reasons not to do something. There's generally only 1 or 2 to do something. And you have to find those 1 or 2 and be convinced of them.
To not take risk is a big risk at a young leader's level, Ms. Morparia?
So I want to, not take a risk, I think is a big risk in itself. You should take a risk. And for those of you who want to go out and start and be your own boss, good luck. But for those of you who want to stay in the corporate world, managing your boss, I think, is a great skill. So let me begin by making a statement. Bosses are a necessary evil that all of us have to live with. And I used to tell my team that all the time and say, but I'm the exception. And as you know, no one's an exception. So your ability to manage your boss, I think, is what the corporate world does allow you. It's all your influencing skills to convince your boss that your idea is worth backing and to get the necessary resources into it.
Before I go back to the audience, Rajesh has a question.
This is specifically for you, Mr. Basan. I've been one of those many who have benefited from the railroad that you built in the form of the BPO industry in India. So here's what I'm facing today. As a young leader, how does one handle the work-life balance piece, given the